All right, are we ready?
We are ready. So without further ado, we have
Okay.
Anastasia Miller to talk about research. So over to you.
Thank you, my dear. Okay, let's see. Do I have a
Yes.
yeah, I
Dean,
need to see
screen.
I'm an old woman. I
oh,
need
I'm
to see
so
my
sorry.
slides. There you go. Okay. The big point is historical research is one of those things where people go, "Oh God, it's an academic." Yeah, I am one, actually. I took 7 years off that none of you see me. You only see my husband, Jared Brown, because I've been hiding in Oxford, getting degrees and doing something nobody expected, which was to take a degree specializing in history, but especially history of drink. There's now only a handful of academics with PhDs coming up, drum roll please, in academic study of drink culture, the history of spirits, the history of how things came about. And it's taken, I'm in my 70s, it has taken my entire life to finally meet up with a whole bunch of collaborators in the academic world who are willing to talk about this. It's kind of fun that way. Really love it, in fact. But that's why I'm here, is to say, guess what? There's a bunch of us actually starting up more trouble than you've ever seen before. Want to say one more thing before I start. 2 words that you'll hear in this world. One is you're a mixographer. I am not a mixographer. I'm actually a historian. There's a big difference you'll find. Can I give you some definitions? The late Gaz Regan was a mixographer. Dale DeGroff is a mixographer. They're people who write books. They write bits and pieces about little bits of history that they find, but they don't do historical research. On the other hand, you've got Dr. Dave Wondrich. Yeah, okay, he got an English lit degree, but I still know he knows how to do proper research. Dave Broom is another one. Doesn't have a doctor, but he and I can talk about all sorts of things because he used to spend a lot more time in libraries than I used to. That's the difference, is there's a process we go through that does a lot more to finding what we know or we can place of the truth at any given time. And it changes all the time, because the more that we find that we can digitize, the more we can all question it, the more we can all share it, and you can also find out the joys of being a historian when you say something and another historian will go, I don't think so, which is a good thing, because it's not saying you're wrong. It's saying, I found something else. Now let's talk about it. And eventually, we'll find out. Biggest problem with drink history is we had a very large gap. The first mixographers, Jerry Thomas, Harry Johnson, people like that, who were actually showing us what the drinks were, sometimes giving us situations for drinks. That was one group. Then World War I happened. Then World War II happened. All of a sudden, we lost the connection of the people who knew and the people who tried to find out. You have, all of a sudden, in the 1950s, basically journalists who were so drunk by the time they were sitting and asking a bartender, so where the hell did the Manhattan come from? And the guy would just come up with whatever he decided sounded like a good idea, and that's what stuck. That's what our history was like when Jared and I showed up in the late 1980s, early 1990s, and went, are you sure that's real? And we started looking and went, oh dear, we're in trouble. Why does this mean anything? Truth is, you need to look at the past to create the present, to create the future. You have to get inspiration as a stepping stone from what existed so that you have a solid foundation for making something that's going to work. So, why bother? Process of relating past to present. That's why we do this. That's why we love doing this. But then there's also another reason. There's a lot of material that has gone wrong. I mean, really wrong. Mysteries in drink history. The Seelbach cocktail, one of my favorite ones. 1995, all of a sudden, somebody said, wow, guess what? There's this great cocktail. It's called the Seelbach. Adam Seeker said he found it in a recipe, and he's worked at the old Seelbach Hotel, so that's got to be cool, right? Gary Regan picked up on it in the Joy of Mixology. Ted Haig picked it up in Vintage Cocktails. And guess what? 2016, Robert Simonson interviewed Adam Seeger, and he said, yeah, I lied, it was total shit. What a bum. It's a cocktail he invented. But he couldn't say it because he knew everybody wanted a cool cocktail from the old days. And that's what he gave him. Fact, fiction. It's bad. It's bad out there. Another one, another favorite. I got contacted by B&B. They said, we really want to know more about the deep history of the Club 21 in New York inventing the B&B, Benedictine and Brandy. That's nice. Okay. Can I charge you for it? Cool. So first point was, yes, we knew what had been said. What had happened was a New York Times journalist had interviewed the guy, the head bartender at the club, and said, so what about the B&B? Blah, said the whole story, and then he printed it in the New York Times. Because it was in the New York Times and it was a rush, nobody fact-checked it. Then they asked us. This was 2007. Well, we said, well, you know, that's funny because it showed up in Cocktail Bill Boothby's book in 1908, Benedictine and Brandy. So I think you're wrong. And then my dear husband, Jared, found that Ernest Hemingway talked about it in 1895 because it was cognac and Benedictine. Okay, so what about the history of the B&B? I think you have to roll it back and take a look at it again. Yes, they decided to make a pre-mixed bottle, but it was an official cocktail. In other words, wouldn't it be nice if we would have had the story of the romance to tell people that Hemingway had found this drink in Paris when he was around? Wouldn't it have been nice not to say something as crazy that somebody could tear apart? I mean, this is where if you're constructing a menu, if you're trying to construct an origin story around a cocktail, you have to have the truth. And then you can write a great one-line origin story and people go, ooh, that sounds like fun. I mean, it's not asking too much, but let's have fun, but let's have honest fun. So that's what I'm trying to explain to you. It's kind of fun. Oh, then it doesn't just happen with drinks. I'm going to get in a lot of trouble now. But I've gotten in trouble with this one before. I actually published it in a book, so don't worry. According to what we understood, Cuban rum was invented by Facundo Bacardi in 1862 when he arrived from Spain. That's nice, but truth is, Charles de Ron came over in 1841 with a machine that was charcoal filtration, not just for liquid, but for sugar. And he also came over with column still. And then he had 3 plantation owners who built those pieces of equipment in their plantations. Oh, and then they opened up an agency so the rest of the Cuban plantation owners could start using the same equipment. The other irony is that there were more French distillers that arrived from Haiti that also helped to use de Ron's equipment. So that all happened 20 years before Facundo Bacardi arrived. Oops. It's nice to know where Cuban rum really came from. So what's my motivation? I have a motivation. Sometimes your inspiration finds you. You have to come up with a great cocktail that goes into your program, that's your signature cocktail. You have to find inspiration for it because it doesn't just happen because you decide to put 3 ingredients in front of you. It comes from somewhere. It gets triggered from somewhere. Sometimes you want to explore ignored or understudied drinks that cry out for attention. Ago Perrone and Giorgio Bagnoni did that with the Connaught, first menus of the Connaught. Eric Lawrence is another one who does that. Let's take a look at the old books. Ooh, that looks interesting, but what if we change this to this? And it's nice to look back and find those inspirations, not just in the American books, but plenty of other stuff from Belgium and France and Spain. And it's like, wow, there's a lot of stuff that needs attention. We have not only touched the tip of the iceberg of what you can find in recipes and variations of recipes. And sometimes you just get lucky. You do. You're flipping through a book and you go, never tried that one before. But you wouldn't find it. You wouldn't be able to do it unless you knew to go look, go dig. It's fun being Indiana Jones. You want to go out and dig and look in different places and find things to play with. So, first lesson I'm teaching you obviously is nothing is entirely original. You are going to have to find places to look. And that's why I'm here to show you. Where to look? First place, you are so lucky in comparison to Jared and I and Dave Broom. Dave and Dave. Oh, I hate that. Dave and Dave. It's Dave Broom, Dave Wondrich. You have it online. You have Chronicling America, Library of Congress, has newspapers all the way back to the late 1700s. If you start looking at the stories of Cato Alexander and his first bar in New York, and you start finding out what he was serving, when you find out what Francis's Tavern was serving, you find it there. Fulton History, same thing. Newspaperarchives.com and BritishNewspaperArchives.com are my nemesis in life. I will never sleep again. My husband looks at these every day, usually around 1, 2, or 3 in the morning. And then he says, hey, guess what I found? And I want to kill him. Google Play, believe it or not, sounds crazy, but they have some very rare books digitally online. And you just don't go to Google Books, go to Google Play. Don't ask me, I don't know. Internet Archive, archive.org, another one where I've found distillation books from the 1600s, digitally. You don't have to worry, you don't have to be as neurotic as I am, and I'll actually own some of them. Do not, under any circumstances, get anywhere near that. That is a nightmare. I can't put it any other way. Wikipedia is a nightmare. Wikipedia is the People's Republic if I can put in any piece of crap that I can find, and until somebody changes it, it will stay that way until somebody changes it. That means it's all wrong and no one's ever researched it, period. I can show you a million of those. But anyways, okay, here's one of the great shootouts of all time. Once upon a time, there was this great story that the cocktail first appeared in print in 1806 in the Balance Columbian Repository. That's nice. We even started Museum of the American Cocktail in New Orleans because we thought, wow, isn't that cool? 2 weeks after we started the plan for the Museum of the American Cocktail, we had the whole thing sorted out, including what's World Cocktail Day. Dave Wondrich found in 1803 in the Farmer's Cabinet, Amherst, New Hampshire, that the word cocktail actually appeared 3 years beforehand. Then I got Dave mad. I mean, I got him really mad. It started with Jared, as usual, looking through things in the middle of the night, and all of a sudden he said, crap! Now what? And he found that at the time, the Prime Minister, Mr. Pitt, had 2 small glasses of oil of Venus, 1 of Parfait Amour, and a cocktail vulgarly called ginger, 1798. Dave actually wrote an article for, I believe it was Esquire Severe in the US, and said, I don't believe they did that to me. And I went, well, but it's still the only one that had the definition was the original one. But the rifling was where did the word first show up? Because if you went further back in the 1990s, they would say, oh, it was this Amazon Indian princess, and she mixed a drink with a feather. Yeah, right. The guy who wrote that was a 1920s journalist, and he was really drunk. That's all I can say. But it was all those stories, and they kept on building up until we finally did this in the 1990s, which I thought was fun. Another one that's very fascinating, just recently found. Again, the reason I'm showing this is because if you look at newspapers, if you wanted to trust what a newspaper has to say, don't. In 1886, a martini cocktail is served at our fashionable clubhouses and consists of 1/2 orange bitters, same quantity of Old Tom gin, and made the same as an ordinary cocktail with a drop of absinthe. 30 mils of orange bitters and 30 mils of Old Tom gin would make most of us die. You add on absinthe, it isn't going to help. But this is what people would find, and they would say it's a gospel. Why would we think it's not gospel? Because we know better. But do we really know better? Do we really know that at one point, before Harry Johnson actually wrote the martini in his book, was there a possibility that somebody was actually serving this? Could have been. But, okay, where else to look? Libraries. I love libraries. Don't be ever afraid to go into a library. If you type in the words cocktail or distillation, you'd be amazed how many things you find. Even more so, if you look at cookbooks, you find some cookbooks contained in the back section cocktail recipes. Alexis Benoit Soyer, who was the first celebrity chef in London in the 1800s, actually invented a few drinks that you don't have to look for his books, which were really beautiful, the Penny Saver cookbook and things like that. Look in Jerry Thomas, 1862. If you start looking at the tiny little type under some of those cocktails, it says after Soyer. In other words, he stole the recipes when he was over in London and he wanted to get a job. And he said, hey, that's a pretty cool cocktail. Good for you. But it was Soyer's, and nobody in the US knew who Soyer was. To a point, there was a certain person who wrote a vintage cocktail book in the US that said, Soyer au champagne means silk champagne. Who doesn't know how to speak French, let alone read it? And who the hell doesn't know that that was a drink that was actually designed for Queen Victoria? But, sorry, I'm probably making people mad already. Another great shootout is you can look for a book, and let's say, well, one is Harry Johnson's 1862. And then you look at the reprint of it in 1934 by Frederick Asbury, which has a lot more drinks in it that Jerry never put in because he was dead. So never believe that was Jerry Thomas's book. I have the original, and I can assure you they're different. It's something if you find one, take a look and see if there's one earlier, and one earlier, and one earlier, because you're going to find, El Floridita books, the same thing. If you look at one from 1942 versus 1939 versus 1933, not the same recipes. Think twice. Okay, and another place to look you may not think about for inspiration, for not just for drinks, but for the design of a bar, Victoria and Albert Museum and the New York Public Library. Now, I think this is one of my favorites. Victoria and Albert Museum shows this Doppelfassbecher as being a paired set of beer beakers. Okay. That is a Boston shaker, as far as any of us have ever been known. Does something look similar? Does something ever say, were they actually mixing with a Doppelfassbecher? Not just pouring beer, and were they actually rolling the drinks? I mean, you have to start thinking deep into your own drink culture and saying, were they actually mixing and rolling before we ever knew about it? Because this piece of material comes from the late 1600s. So we might have been rolling before we even knew what we were mixing. This is another fascination. Oh, and my other favorite, I never knew what a nutmeg grater really looked like, and I used to find them in books and go, yeah, and you take a grating of nutmeg, and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to sit there with a little grater and go, get. No, it was sexy. It was a thing about this big. I actually have one. And you put your nutmegs inside, you lift up the lid, and it was the classiest thing you could do in service or personal service is to have your own nutmeg grater. It's another thing to think about playing with. I mean, why not? Inspiration. And then my favorite inspiration, movies, television. The Thin Man, of course. You want to know how to shake the martini? Watch The Thin Man. Look at the beautiful glassware, the one that became the Nick and Nora. My other favorite, Doctor Who. Jack Harkness thinks it's the end of his life. It's the end of the Second World War. He's going to be blown up by a bomb in the Second World War, and he asks for cocktail 197. It was a martini in a swimming pool. But, you know, future does what future does. But you should look when you're watching television, looking at film, and see how drinks are presented. And it's amazing some of the insights that you have for that. Lesson number 2, exhaust your search. Leave no stone unturned. There are days you want to shoot yourself for going down the wrong way. There are. There's days you go, why did I go that way? That just led to a dead end. But it's worth it. It's worth doing the dead ends. Now, another problem. What's primary versus secondary? I always start with secondary. I'm always looking at somebody's cocktail book or looking at somebody's history book. Or I was involved with Dave and Noah in Oxford Companion Spirits and Cocktails, which is a secondary source. All the people who were involved in writing actually had to do the research. Not all of them succeeded, I can assure you. They had to be rewritten, which is why it took 12 years to produce a book that was only supposed to take 3 years. But at least someone was checking. Someone was saying, okay, let's look again. But it's still only a second-hand knowledge. This is primary source. Now, this is one of my recent favorites because there's always been the discussion that at one point during the gin craze, that beer declined, gin increased, and then all of a sudden it decreased again, and the numbers are flying back and forth in history books. I found the actual handwritten excise report in the National Archives and photographed it. Yeah, try to go after that one. Come on, I dare you. Another one, there was the joke of, where was the first juniper spirit found? And again, crazy joke. Okay, Germany, be very proud. It wasn't Holland. It wasn't Netherlands. It was you. Sorry. The book was written in 1476 by Michael Puff von Schrick. Second version, adapting some of his work, was published in 1500 by Hieronymus Brunswick. But then it came to England in 1527 and was translated by Lawrence Andrew. In other words, not a connection between Holland and England, but between Germany and England. More to be said about that in another 4 months, but I can't tell you more. Sorry. I'm almost finished with the book. I have to be a good girl. So if you're looking primary, you're looking originally produced during the period you are researching. Buyer beware. Your author might be biased. There's a lot of stuff that I've read that was primary, that was written by evangelical preachers. And they're saying, oh, people were drinking 2 gallons of gin a day. We'd all be dead if we drank 2 gallons of gin a day during the gin craze. Come on, give me a break. Secondary, produced after the event you're researching. Not infallible proof regardless if the person has, please do not take this as profiling, with a beard and looks like he has a suit on, and he can go, I'm an authority. And you go, oh, shut up. You're no more of an authority unless you can prove that you have primary sources that you have inspected. I don't care what you think. Show me the stuff, or I don't believe you. And there's plenty of them out there, but that's okay. I get used to it. So, lesson 3. Everything you find needs to be tested against another source. You don't want to look at my office. You don't want to look at Jared's computer. We will actually have comparative runs of, okay, where's your source? Let's build a chronology on it. Who is the author? What's going on? And you just go, oof, we're in trouble. Am I in trouble?
No, I was just saying that this is amazing.
But it all comes down to, hang on, quality versus quantity. Now, I spend a lot of time doing this, so I'm crazy. It's okay. Really, it's fine. But keep an open mind when you're looking at things. Look at where they come from. I mean, sometimes you look at a little pamphlet. I mean, Constante of Floridita used to have these little pamphlets that he would have a recipe, and it would say daiquiri. But which one of the 5 daiquiris was it? And he actually started there and going, okay, let's play with provenance. Now let's look at liability. Well, of course it was Constante. It must be true. Jack Cuddy would write about it in the New York Times. And you go, okay, getting closer. But you stamp on it until you finally go, this is not fiction. This is not somebody's late night drunken spree, but it is an actual truth. And that's when you go, okay, I've got it. Be meticulous, of course. You don't want to know how many notebooks we also have. But what it comes down to, how do you take all this junk? That's what I feel like I have. Little tiny bits of stuff everywhere. I'm beginning to feel like Abner Ravenswood in Indiana Jones. I mean, it's like you just have stuff everywhere. But eventually, you can take a pile of it, and you can go, how can this source be used? Can I use it to make a new twist on a recipe? Can I take variations of recipes of the same recipe but found by different people and find a variation that will bring it up to something that I can produce for modern day? In other words, you have to sit with all of it and go, okay, what's it going to do? You can do it with menu descriptor stories. Please, if you're going to write a menu and you're going to put provenance in a story on it and you're going to have your waits sitting there and telling a story, please don't tell another lie. I mean, it's not worth it. You're going to look untrustworthy when more people discover. More customers I've discovered actually do read, and they actually do look themselves. I've had more Negroni authorities recently. I want to kill myself. Really. But you know, our audiences are becoming more intelligent because they can go on Google and they can start looking for things, and they are going to have banter with you, especially if they're really neurotic. So you've got to do it. Is it useful? I didn't say everything's useful, but most of it is. Can you compare it with something else? Can you take a comparison of how a fizz was made in America versus a fizz made in England versus fizz made in Germany? And it's amazing, again, the cultural variations you find if you look. I mean, it's really great. Is there a pattern emerging? Can you imagine that? Is there a story emerging, or does it need more research? I mean, some things we're still working on 30 years later. Do you have a hunch? Follow it. Why not? It gives you something to do when you really want to play with an idea. Play with it all the way. Conclusions. Conclusions without tried and tested evidence in support are not facts, no matter how loudly they're proclaimed by some eminent idiot or someone who says they're an authority, unless they have footnotes this deep against the entire page of what they say. And if I can look back at those footnotes, and I go back and I go into libraries and I go into files and I find them and I say, and where the hell did you put that in there? Because it isn't in that book. Oh, you just wanted to look good. Okay, fine. But, again, dig, 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 dig. And the final lesson is nothing is written in stone. Because the more we digitize, the more we all start to look, the more we find. I mean, again, favorite ones other than the obvious are, did you realize that the American cocktail bar system of the 1880s, that everybody goes, oh, wasn't that cool, in 1860s, was actually a product of the German diaspora. We've actually looked at it and realized the major bartenders, Willie Schmidt, Harry Johnson, all came from here. And the system of service, the beer garden versus the Irish saloon, make up the two different styles of bartending we still have today. One is a little more elegant, not even elegant per se, but more familial and comfortable, and the other one's a little more rowdy. Let's just admit it, it's rowdy. But again, it was a surprise to find. There's things you find out there that make you feel better about creating a culture of cocktail from wherever you are by looking at the sources from that particular area. It really is amazing, and it will never stop. Oh, there's one other thing I forgot to put in here. So there's another place, you look, that we started building. I haven't had much time because I've been spending my time with my head in a thesis, but I'm going to go back to it again, is we've been digitizing part of our book collection. It's called euvs.com.org. One of those. It's worth going on so you can see 5 different copies of the Floridita cocktail book. It's worth looking at the Continero's cocktail book. I believe we have 3 of the Harry Johnsons. It's a good lesson to start looking at what happens when reprints are made and people add things to reprints. Peter Dorelli and I just finished one the other day. They came for a visit, and we realized, nobody has looked at this before, is that the 1933 version, we know that one. The one that was reprinted in the 1990s is a direct facsimile. But guess what? There's 2 more in the middle from the 1950s and 1970s that have drinks in them that do not exist in 1933. And we're starting to look at those and go, okay, who did that one? And that's the kind of stuff that I do. That's the kind of stuff you can do, not on large scale, come on, you have to be completely obsessed. But it's the kind of thing that it's great to be able to do with great confidence. You found something new, you found something to twist on something, but you know the origin of it, and you can explain it to your customers. You can feel proud for serving it. And that's something we used to be able to do that I'm hoping we can get back to. But I think I'm done.
I think my brain has imploded.
Mine does all the time.
I have so many questions that I don't even know what to say, because I'm still kind of imagining how the morning coffee is at your place and discussing like, is this correct? Is this correct? What's your source? What's your source?
I love the you both compare your different backdrops and challenge each other on the sources.
Oh, we do.
And you
We
with
do.
the footnotes. It's
We
like,
do a lot. I mean, we actually had an argument once about you have the Ramos Gin Fizz, and then you have the Golden Fizz, which most people don't know because they've had it in San Francisco called the Tadich Fizz, but it's actually the Ramos Golden Fizz, but it was never written in a newspaper. You have to find it by going to the places where Harry Ramos went to and actually sit and write it down and go, we got that one there. Okay, got it. Okay. It's crazy. And we still have the fight about, we actually got kicked out of Harry's New York bar the first time. I said, oh yeah, the Bloody Mary. It was originally equal parts French tomato juice and Smirnoff. And I got kicked out. 6 months later, I walked by, the manager drags me in and goes, you were right. And I'm like, oh God, can I have a drink now? Yeah, okay, good. Hey, you run risks when you do this, but it's great risks. And it comes up with great nuances on things, as I say. The Bloody Mary we all do is actually from the King Cole Bar when Pete Penio finally retired, fell in love, got married, went to the U.S., and he invented that one. The damn celery stick, though, 1966, the Ambassador East Hotel pump room. They ran out of swizzle sticks one day. So where did the Bloody Mary really come from? It evolved, and it kept on evolving. Even the Red Snapper, it keeps on evolving. And again, that's another great thing to notice: is how does a drink evolve from what it is or what it was to what it can become, depending on where it goes.
And I think this is a good lesson to keep in mind, because a lot of the time I think that bartenders, they get very stuck in what is right and what is wrong, and then rather looking at it as a progression, I
remember some arguments with Sasha, yeah. Sasha used to sit there and say, but it has to be precisely this and this. I'm going, honey, watch this. Free pour. Now that's more to your taste. It wasn't a matter of sitting there and doing, psychotic measurements. It can be done, but do it with a more fluid understanding of what your customer expects out of you.
So if you had to choose, I mean, this is going to be hard, obviously, but if you had to choose like a moment where you were researching something, you were looking for something specific, and then you couldn't find it, but you found maybe something else, like what is one of your favorite, like, historical holy shit moments?
Holy shit.
The one that I'm publishing a book on this spring.
Can you give us
You're all
some?
going to be mad at me. As I say, I gave you part of a hint. Gin does not come. It's not the baby of your neighbor. I am really sorry, it's not. It is a drink or a spirit that was actually crafted in Germany by women who would take beer and make beer into neutral spirit instead of brandy. And they would put juniper berries with it. They were doing this in the 1450s and 1470s until it was made illegal so that the brandy-producing men could make their version. The only other difference is Geneva has rye in it. I can show you more than enough proof that English gin never had rye in it, ever, and never will. And that's where I go, stay tuned.
I think we will open up for questions from the room because...
Can I ask one little quick one?
Yeah.
But just before, so for example, you said that you found a recipe with the martini recipe being, 1 ounce of orange bitters and 1 ounce of... do you ever take into account people's perception of what bitters is in different areas? For example, when we think as cocktail bartenders of bitters, we think non-potable bitters, your Angostura bitters, your Regan's orange bitters. But orange bitters like Campari is a potable bitters, and a shot of gin and a shot of Campari is perfectly palatable, right?
Totally palatable.
So, because I've always thought, the only difference between a martini and a Negroni is that the proportions and whether or not you consider bitters, orange bitters, Campari or Regan's.
I mean?
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So do you have to take that kind of stuff into account?
More than you want to know. Including another favorite was we found one Bloody Mary recipe that you can understand why people didn't like the Bloody Mary because there was a typo in the news article that said, and put in a couple of dashes of tobacco sauce. Yeah, that would turn me off. Okay. But again, you have to look and say, what are you talking about? Because it could be that they found a nice orange bitters, nice Italian family had orange bitters, and they said, oh, take a load of this. Wouldn't faze me in the least. But again, you have to look at it, you have to decide where it was coming from, who the author was, and decide which culture it was coming from. Which in the US, a lot of the cocktails, you do have to look. Were they originating from German origins, Irish origins, or Italian origins? Because the martini is another one of those, where the martini would not have existed if they hadn't started exporting vermouth in the 1800s to New York for the Italian community.
And it's very interesting because we did a video actually with Dave Wondrich last year where he talks about the history of at the time, 5 most popular drinks.
Yeah.
And Old Fashioned was one of the ones that he talked about. And he said that actually it wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for the creation of bitter back in UK.
Yeah,
and it
1700s, Dr. Stoughton's.
Exactly.
For the number 2 patent, yeah.
Everything is connected, but interconnected.
Yeah, but that's why it's fun when if you ever have an opportunity to get friends together and you decide to do a little coffee clutch of insanity. It's amazing the stuff you find. I mean, there's times that Wondrich and I have sat, or Brune and I have sat, and we've gone, yeah, okay, and where did this drink come from? Oh, this restaurant. What? And when we start talking about, well, was it the grasshopper, believe it or not? He didn't know where the grasshopper had invented, but he also didn't realize how close it was to what we're still serving now. And he thought it was something completely different, and I said, nope, there it is, right there. So, but it's great to play.
Well, can I just say that I support the idea. I know it wasn't an idea until now, but if you ever wanted to create like Trivial Pursuit Drinks Edition, I will 100% get in line to buy that. I'm just saying.
Okay. You're just saying. You're going to make me do more work, aren't you?
All right. Any questions from the room or from the live stream? I can see.
We've got a question down the front.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. You're obviously a great speaker. Really enjoyed the talk.
Well, I did teach undergraduates in university for the past 2 years in between doing things.
All right. So I got two questions.
Yeah.
So the first one is, you mentioned it, I think, a little bit, but how do you fund this kind of research? Because I can't imagine there's a lot of people going around and saying, I need someone to research me the history of whatever drink you can come up with.
It happens all the time. I have people. I have had brands, rather large companies, hiring me for years to look up different drinks, and yes, it does get funded by them in a lot of cases. The other is that before we started getting funded by Pernod Ricard or Bacardi or House of Suntory or Diageo, is we used to buy a lot of books in junk shops. And in fact, that used to be the problem of having Gary Regan, Dale DeGraw, Dave Wondrich, Jared and I living in the same city, because we're all going to the same junk shops. And go, hey, I found that one. No, mine. And we amassed quite a collection, which is also why we started the EUVS website, because we realized you can no longer buy a lot of these things. And if you can, they're way too expensive now. But at least we can get it out there so people can use it. Other stuff we've been very lucky to find. Google has picked up on it and made collaborations with the British Library, with the Wellcome Collection, with all these major Library of Congress, so that you have access to it without paying for it. But other than that, we just have done it because at the time when we first started doing this, when we wrote Shaken Not Stirred Celebration Martini back in 1995, we were poor as church mice. Jared was working chef at a restaurant. I was busy editing things and not making that much money. And we decided, well, let's start playing with a website. And we started looking at what we were interested in. It was cocktails. In fact, he came in with 2 martinis while I'm sitting there playing with the website. And you begin to realize that you become impassioned enough. You don't get paid for it at first, but then eventually you do.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
And also, are there any other questions? So you mentioned this little thing about secondary and primary sources, yes. And for example, the one about the origin of the word cocktail, yeah, in 1798, yeah, I believe it was.
Yep.
How do you decide that this is now a primary source? Because it could have been some journalist in 1798 going like, okay, that guy mentioned he's drinking.
I haven't said it was until I find a diary, which I might find in Samuel Pepys' diaries at some point. I mean, I haven't gone through all of his diaries. I mean, it's really boring stuff. But I might go through his diaries at some point in the 1600s and look at other diaries in the 1700s and see if I can find the word cocktail outside of print. But again, it's not really primary. It's the next closest thing to primary. But I want to see it real primary. And that's where it gets to be deep, dark, dirty fun, and you just spend all of your time hiding in libraries and getting dusty and using asthma inhalers. But you do find it eventually. Or I may not find it. I'm getting old. I may not find it. But somebody else might go, hey, I found the diaries of Lady Anne something or other. And she might have the word cocktail in there from 1702, for all we know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
You're very welcome.